So I'm here today with Joe Haffner with Haffner and now Haffner Mulhern Law. And Joe is a real estate attorney extraordinaire. And I'm really excited that we have some time to get to know you today. I thought that we could start with just tell me a little bit about Joe.
Sure. Well, I have been practicing law for about 34 years. Came out of college, went right to law school, started a job in a bigger firm downtown. And within a few years, I decided I wanted to do my own thing. So I started Haffner Law back in 1993 and grew that business over time. And lucky enough to have my daughter join the business about 3 years ago and made her a partner this year and renamed the business to Haffner and Mulhern. And we're excited to be moving forward. Our business generally is an all-inclusive business, which means we do a lot of real estate, but we do a lot of whatever our clients need. So we might do other things, business litigation, and other matters. But Haley and I do a lot of real estate, and we're focusing the business moving forward on more real estate.
Well, good. It's certainly been your strength that you've handled a lot of transactions and you're at the top of a lot of people's lists as a real estate attorney in the area. So let's talk about the real estate transaction. So I like to, when I have a client, have them meet the attorney before, like there's always a sense of urgency typically created in a real estate transaction. And before I just throw you into a conversation, an email, a phone call with a client, I like to kind of introduce you ahead of time. But tell me a little bit about, like that's on my side of the process, but tell me a little bit about your process within a real estate transaction, seller or buyer.
So the pre-introduction is a great thing. I don't see that happen that often.
I know,
but it should.
I love that you have one.
But it should happen.
Agreed.
And the reason being is because in any real estate transaction, the start is when the contract's signed by the parties. And oftentimes we don't get that contract until a day, 2, 3 days after it's been signed, when that contract comes with specific business day contingencies. That's usually 5 business days. So the sooner we talk to a client, the better. Knowing that we may talk to a client that ends up never signing a contract. Not a problem. Those phone calls are to make the clients comfortable with actually getting to the process of saying, yes, I'm ready to sign a contract. When that doesn't happen, and the first thing we hear from a client is getting a contract either from the client or the client's agent, we then take that file in and we communicate with the client the same day. And then we process documents either the same day or the following morning to the client. And these would just be standard documents that we put together based on our review of the contract and our review of the taxes, the assessed valuation, and any other thing that might be needed to review for a specific property. An example would be if you're in Wilmette, we make sure the client knows there's a transfer tax in Wilmette. If you're in Glenview, we make sure they know there's not a transfer tax in Glenview. So we try to educate the client for things they might not have heard of. And then once we get the process, we have the contract, we make contact with the client. We start the process of the important things for buyers. It's modifications to the contract, making sure the inspection goes well, and resolving any inspection issues, making sure the loan, if there is a loan, is approved, and then getting us to closing. For sellers, it's the reverse, making sure that we take care of all the buyer's needs so the buyer's happy, making sure we do all of our work to get the matter to a closing. And from the seller's perspective, they do all the work prior to the closing. From the buyer's perspective, they're going to show up to closing to sign the closing documents. Guaranteed, if there's a loan, they're going to have to be at the closing to sign closing documents. So we hold the party's hand from the time we get the contract or from the time the contact is made by the agent to ask us to contact the client until we get finished with the closing. There'll oftentimes be post-closing issues that come up that as part of our representation, we handle those issues. They're usually very minor, and most of these things are handled phone calls or emails. There's a process that we go through as attorneys, and we keep the same process because we've done thousands and thousands of closings.
Yes. Yep.
And we know what works, and we keep to that process because we've been effective as to the process that we use, and we know that it's most helpful for our clients.
Right, I love that. So I'm a very big process and checklist person. If you know me, I have checklists for everything. And so kind of the companies that I associate with and start to surround myself with are those who are detail oriented and intentional and very checklist. And I love how I just feel comfortable kind of passing the baton. In my letter to my client with a contract, I will say, you know, here are the dates, here are the things to note, and you know, I'm passing the communication baton from me to you, knowing that I will be in the loop on everything and I'll be here for questions. But it's so nice to be able to have the confidence as I'm passing that baton, you know, to my clients.
So a few things there. It's funny you mentioned lists, checklists, because we have for both a seller and a buyer what we call punch list. And it's a document that we keep updated as to things that need to be done in the transaction and have they been completed, and how has the contract changed based on the work that we've done. Oftentimes it's the tax proration has changed. Oftentimes there's a credit for some inspection issues. We keep all that in the punch list, so when we're at the closing we pull up the punch list and we know here's what our expectations are based on previous agreements. And we do that both for a buyer and a seller. And in terms of our contact with the client, we always make our initial email to the client just between us and the client for attorney-client privilege purposes.
Absolutely.
Thereafter, agents will always be CC'd on emails to make sure the agent is apprised to what is happening with their transaction. So everyone's on the same page, there's no confusion. We find that it's the easiest way to do that, to keep, technically speaking, as attorney, as the agent, we're both agents for our client, and therefore we should all be on the same page.
I love it, love it, love it. That's why you're one of my favorite attorneys. Yep. So can you give us an example, without names of course? I mean, we all know this business can get crazy because selling or buying is a really emotional. Somebody was saying anxious when they get to the inspection, but I don't know if it's anxiety or if it's emotion or if it's, you know, a family member that's also attending. I think it's a combination as it all comes together. But is there a story of like a tough situation?
Sure.
With either a seller or buyer?
I would say that
How do you handle that?
90+% of transactions go relatively smoothly. There might be a little bumper here, but nothing that is a major problem. But you're going to have, you know, 5% of the time you're going to find where there's an actual issue, and most of the time it's because of emotions. It has less to do in facts and common sense and more to do about emotions. And you know, two real easy examples. I was doing a buy years ago, and my client was buying a townhome from it was a foreclosed property. And the foreclosing lender had no key and one garage door opener, and that was it. And my client insisted that they would not close unless they had two garage door openers. And I was sitting at a title company. This is back before the computer was on our desk. I was sitting at a title company trying to explain to the client, you have one car, you only need one garage door opener. This is a foreclosing lender. They can't find the other one because the person who was foreclosed on probably has it. And she wouldn't close. And I tried to use common sense and said, well, let me see what I can do. So I got on the phone and I called a Home Depot type place, and I asked, do you sell remotes that can be used for garage door openers? She said, yes, $49.99. It's a universal remote, it's easy to program. Explained that to my client. She said, okay, that'll work. I cut my fee by $50, so she got $50 extra, so she can go to Home Depot and buy that. That client eventually used me 6-7 more times for transactions. And I knew by making sure her comfort zone was there, she got the $50. I knew it would pay back for me in spades coming down. So I got to a point where she realized, yes, I'll close, right? On a sell end, I had a seller once that was selling a property that was in pretty pristine condition and was vacant at the time that it was but at the time it went under contract.
Mm-hmm.
And the buyer happened to be an attorney that I knew his dad very well. And the buyer comes into closing with his aunt as his attorney as well, and says to me, I'm not closing unless I get $2,500 to refurnish the wood floors. And I said, the place was vacant when you saw it. How can you have an issue? He's like, well, I just noticed it today. So I told my seller, who was an investor, I said, don't give him the money. I said, believe me, trust me, it's noon. This buyer, I told him he can come back before 5, we'll still close. I said, he'll be here at 4. And I remember calling my client at around 4:15 and said he just pulled in. So what I told my seller was, don't just give him $2,500 because he thinks you're going to be forced to give him $2,500.
Right.
Sometimes you have to stick to your guns. Common sense prevails that the place was vacant. He should have seen any problem. And therefore, this is a time where you stick to your guns as opposed to times where you might say, you want a $200 credit, common sense says just give it to him so we can close.
Right. Well, good.
So that was a difficult
Good.
one, and that guy came back and closed, and I took satisfaction in that I saved my client $2,500
Absolutely.
for an issue that really wasn't an issue.
Right. It's tough when they do that, though. And
Correct.
they do, because
Correct.
they think they have you over a barrel.
Correct. It's always about leverage, right? And one other example I'll give you for buyers that I often tell buyers, and I guess sellers as well, but buyers most importantly, when they're upset about something that they see at a final walkthrough that is very minor, but it's upsetting to them.
Yeah.
I ask them this question: if the seller doesn't agree, but we close anyway, and you move in tonight, and you wake up tomorrow morning, do you think you'll ever think about this again the rest of your life?
Right.
And then they'll say, no, I won't. I'm like, then what are we doing here? Let's get this transaction moving.
Right.
Let's not, cause a problem over something that you will never think about again.
After today.
Yeah, and if
Right,
it's something larger than that, then okay. Many sellers are offended when a buyer will say something about their property that they lived in 20 years. It's offensive for you to say, boy, the basement is, a dump.
Right.
Right?
Right.
And it offends a seller. And use common sense and don't say that. But when it happens, I always tell my sellers the same thing. Do you really care? They're asking for $300. You give them $300, you're done. You're never going to see or speak to them again or think about them again.
Right.
That's
And
the
we're done.
reality, and
Yeah.
we're done. So common sense always prevails in these situations.
Nice. So I have a question. Title insurance or title company. What role does a title company play in the real estate transaction? I mean, I think title insurance, people don't understand that title insurance, there's the policy that the seller needs to purchase, and then there's the buyer side of the title policy. So talk a little bit about that, or the title company and the role the title company plays.
So most sellers and buyers don't understand much about title insurance. Most of them don't even understand about their homeowners and auto insurance when I talk to them. So certainly title is something they don't understand. And I generally explain to clients, title insurance is to ensure that the buyer's getting clean title to the property. And if the buyer has a lender, making sure the lender gets clean title to the property for their loan. It's a pretty simple process. It's a title policy that it's an insurance policy, I should say, that most people will never use. Having said that, it's a very standard type of insurance, and the most important thing about title insurance is not the actual insurance itself, because they're underwritten by basically two companies. What's really important is how they service.
Okay.
And to me, everything about the title insurance industry is knowing that it's more of a service industry than an insurance industry. And when we talk about service industry, we want to make sure we're using a company that's going to provide us a service, which means when we ask questions of them, when we ask them to define their policy or provide us information regarding any exception to title, that they reply to us and provide us that information in a timely manner.
That's imperative.
And that's why title companies are really service companies, most importantly. And I owned my own title company for many years, sold it back in 2017, and as soon as I sold it, I immediately went to a company called Proper Title because I was comfortable and familiar with them. And since probably January of 2018, the majority of my work has gone through Proper Title. I'm comfortable with their staff. I'm comfortable with their closers, and they have excellent closers. One of the main thing about title companies that they do is they provide an escrow closing, which basically means once we're at the table to close, title companies can take everyone's money, everyone's documents, all the lender's money, the lender's documents, the seller's documents, any documents that the lawyers prepare, and they're going to make sure everyone has signed off as they should on all the documents. Everyone has paid the money in that they're required to make this transaction work.
Right.
And then once they have determined that all the parties have done everything they need to do, they're then going to pay out everyone, give the seller their money, give the attorneys their money, give anyone else who's involved, like yourself, the agents, their money, and then give title to the property to the buyer. That's called an escrow closing. In order to do that properly, you have to provide good service. Proper title service is incredible.
Right. It's so interesting that you were saying that, because I never looked at a title company as a service company. But I have to, Proper Title is my favorite title company, and it's just for those very reasons. I know some of the closers. I know a lot of the people that are the heart of Proper Title, and that's part of why it's my favorite. But also, they're on top of it. They're efficient. They're detailed. They're proactive, actually, almost, instead of being reactive. And it's just they're a really major part of my team of a transaction, and that's
correct. There's nothing worse than being reactive in anything in life. That's never usually a good thing. But certainly in running a business, you need to be proactive. You need to think ahead. You need to know that there might be an issue and get an answer to that issue before it becomes an issue. And that's the great thing about Proper Title. And the turnaround time is what's extremely important. When we send an email to them with a question, maybe about a survey, maybe about how we're wording a deed based on a marriage or divorce. We want to know that they've approved this, so when we go to the closing, that's already been approved and discussed well ahead of time, as opposed to trying to jump through the hoop at closing to resolve something, have something changed, or have something signed again because it wasn't done the way the title company would like it. And they're very good about understanding that when an email comes out, that they're going to get an email back to us almost within an hour, to make sure that they're not holding us up from doing our job. And that's the service piece of it. Right?
They're great. So if somebody wanted to use your services, how would they get in touch with you?
Generally, in the world we live in now, it's very easy, right? You Google me, and you get my name, you get my number, and you get my email address. But I would say most people email me because they've been referred by someone, or they get my cell phone and they call me, right? And we're at that stage in our careers that we remember the days where we never handed out our cell phone. Now everyone has our cell phone. It's on our letterhead. To be fair, people, 80% of the people probably call my cell as opposed to my work number. So yes, any of your clients, email, cell, work. I always tell clients it's so easy when you're thinking of all of your questions at 10 at night, right before you're going to bed. Just email me all your questions, because that's when they're there. When you call me, you forget half your questions. So I always tell clients, email me, because you can put all your thoughts in an email, and I can respond to them line by line, which is how I do it. I respond line by line, and it usually answers all the questions.
Well, good. Thank you so much. I really appreciate
you for
coming
having me.
in so that we can chat, and I really appreciate you being a part of the team that I use.
I appreciate you having me as part of your team.
Yeah.
Very good. Thank you very much.
Sure.